is Outlook, a review of the month in Greater Cleveland, a discussion of the important developments and what they mean.
Hello. Welcome to Outlook, which is WVIZ's monthly discussion of the news as it's happened and as it's going to happen, we hope. I'm Todd Simon. I'm an associate editor of the Plain Dealer, and I'm filling in again for Will Irwin. Professor Irwin, again, is up in Vancouver trying to explain to Canadians how America works. This evening we're going to discuss two things. One is the mayoralty campaign. We are going to choose a mayor very shortly in Cleveland. It's a matter that I think is of urgent interest, and the books closed down at the Board of Elections just this past month, and the entries are now in their lanes and are getting ready to plow the ground and maybe get started to run. The other thing we're going to discuss is the poverty program and the poverty picture in this community. And we will have a guest here, Mr. Stephen Minter, from the County Welfare Department, who is going to discuss one major part of what the poverty program is trying to do, how well it's doing it, and what its present situation and outlook are. But first we're going to discuss the mayoralty program, and for this I'm going to introduce our panelists. To my left is Mr. Charles Loeb. Mr. Charles Loeb is managing editor of the Call and Post, veteran newsman, and he has the distinction of being an old friend of mine. And to his left, almost as old a friend of mine, Michael Hrihosik. Mr. Hrihosik is also a veteran who has been a reporter for not only newspapers but also television, and is now with WKYC, Channel 3. He covers county government, transit, city government, public affairs in general, and politics too. Now, you two gentlemen, I think I'm going to kick off with you by just simply asking you, Mike, suppose you started off and tell us who are the entries and where are we here in the mayoralty campaign?
Well, I'll start it off, Todd, by getting Charlie all excited by stating that the way I see it, it looks like Mayor Looker will win the Democratic nomination for mayor and then beat Seth Taft in November and be reelected. Charlie, you pick it up at that stage.
Well, I won't get particularly excited about it because I have been used to bucking odds for a long time. I have the consolation of knowing one thing, that I am editor of about the only newspaper in the city of Cleveland who knows exactly who they're going to endorse for mayor. We endorsed this gentleman before, bucking terrific odds, and we almost brought him in. I do know that the books are closed, and let's hope they remain closed, which may change the odds and the crystal balling that you're doing, Mike, at this particular time. This is an election which is going to be watched throughout the country and probably in foreign countries too, because it is a highly significant election, an election which will test the mettle of the city of Cleveland, which will project an image which I hope will counteract some of the bad image that we're getting, justifiably or not, in a great number of national publications.
Well, Charlie, you're being a little subtle here. One thing I think we should do is say right off, you didn't mention which was the candidate that your paper's going to endorse, but I presume that you mean Carl Stokes. And I presume, too, that you're saying that here is going to be a test of whether the city of Cleveland has become so polarized that it's going to be a Negro versus white sort of an election. Of course, in that case, if it were strictly on a matter of those population statistics, the Negro population, or voter population certainly, in Cleveland, constitutes perhaps 1/3 of the votes. White votes, if they all vote white, would be 2/3 of the votes, and the question would be whether Stokes, as the Negro candidate, on the one side, could overcome both Ralph Locher, the mayor, and Frank Celeste, who is also on the ballot. And that would be like a three-way division of 100% pie. I'd like to ask you, do you think that Mr. Stokes can count on enough white votes to add to his 1/3 to be a challenger to either of the other two?
Well, that's the intangible and the unknown factor in this race. Of course, there's some other unknowns. We work on a theory if you're trying to analyze how a contest will come out. You try to analyze the happenings of day to day. There are certain happenings in this city and in other cities that will affect the race in this city. There are certain events like the riots yesterday in Detroit that certainly affect the determination and the feeling of white voters toward a Negro candidate or toward Negroes generally. And it would be stupid to overlook the fact that if he gets good breaks, then we'll have some people who will vote on the merit of the candidate. Now, of course, Stokes' hope is that the racial angle will not be brought in this campaign. This is utopia. It's going to be brought in by the mere fact that Stokes is a Negro candidate. It has been demonstrated, however, that there are people in this country, whether they live in Cleveland or not, who go beyond considerations of race. I think that Stokes can take heart from what happened to Ed Brooke, where Negro votes were only about 8% of the population or less, a very infinitesimal number. But these people voted for Brooke because he registered well. He had a good background in government, and I think in a manner, Stokes, compared to Cleveland, has made a favorable impression on a lot of people.
Well, Charlie, last time, pardon me, 2 years ago, when Mr. Stokes was running, your newspaper came out with an editorial which I objected. It said that Negroes ought to vote for Mr. Stokes, and in effect, if they didn't vote for, if they were Negroes and did not vote for a Negro candidate, they were in effect being treacherous to their own group. And my reaction to that was, well, if that's what you're saying for your people, then perhaps the implication is that if a person is white, then he ought to vote white.
Well,
and just a moment. I'd just like to say one more thing. In this present campaign, the question keeps arising, is a man running on his color? I would certainly think that reprehensible for either Locher, Celeste, Taft, or Stokes. But he can't have it both ways. And it seems to me that if he's running on his color, then he's not running as a candidate equipped for anything. He's not saying that he's good at government or that he has a good program for the town or anything. He's saying, everybody, decide which color you are when you look in the mirror in the morning, and that's the way you ought to vote on November 7th.
Well, let's separate the two opinions, and let's separate your criticism. The criticism isn't the criticism of Stokes, because Stokes never made an appeal on his race. Now, what the Call Post did, certainly we expected you to criticize it, and your criticism is probably justifiable. But the connotation there is that the election of Carl Stokes has Negro connotations. If Stokes can be elected mayor of a big city, it has connotations not only for the Negro in Cleveland, but it has connotations for the Negro in every big city in the United States. The election of Stokes to mayor, as mayor of Cleveland, or any Negro as mayor of a big metropolitan city, would be a beacon of hope for Negroes throughout the world. And that a Negro, because when you evaluate Stokes against the competition 2 years ago, or against the competition today, he stacks up well in ability and in all the qualifications to make a good public servant. So that if we could elect him, a great deal of the frustration, that new hope would be born in the hearts of all Negroes, and it's the hopelessness of the Negro position that is at the root of riot and disorder and lawlessness in this country. So while we may have been chauvinistic in our approach to call on Negroes to support their own, our crime largely was unsympathy, because the metropolitan press here, in a very smooth and clever way, was doing virtually the same thing that we were doing.
May I ask you, Mike, since we're talking about hope and whether anyone has it, and frustration, your opening statement indicated that Mr. Stokes had very little hope of being able to pull this off and to do this for the Negro people and, for that matter, for the total community. How do you think Stokes could, or do you think that he could at all, get together enough votes to win the Democratic primary nomination?
Well, let's put it the other way. I'll tell the factors that work in favor of the incumbent. Number one is contrasted 2 years ago
when you say incumbent, that's a pretty long word. Let's say Ralph Locher, present mayor. Okay.
2 years ago, when Carl Stokes almost upset Mayor Locher, it was a general election. We all know that the turnout in the primary is much less than it is in the general. In the general, you can count on some Republican votes switching over, which I think Carl got a great deal of. Number two, this time it's a three-way race instead of four. I have great respect for Frank Celeste, but I don't think he can take enough votes away from Mayor Locher to aid Carl Stokes. Three, registration is off by 50,000. And according to the Board of Elections officials, most of those who have been dropped from the rolls are, let's face it, on the east side, in the Negro wards. Now, that's going to be very important for Carl to start a real big registration drive between now and August the 23rd. That would be helpful to him.
Do you think that if he can count upon a solid Negro vote in the Democratic primary, that he could get up beyond, let's say, 33% of the vote and make it even a three-way tie, presuming, of course, that Mr. Celeste gets into the race? Mr. Celeste announced that he was a candidate, but he has hardly been heard from ever since. And as far as his impression, this, of course, is my opinion, as far as the impression he's made upon the community and as far as what progress he may have made in trying to build a base which he didn't have within the city of Cleveland, I have yet to see where he has actually become a contender. And, of course, every vote he loses with this polarized situation that we've been talking about must surely redound to the benefit of the incumbent, as you call him, Ralph S. Locher. And Ralph Locher, at this point, looks as if he should be able to get 50% of the vote. Trying to match that would be a rather difficult job, I would think, on the part of Carl Stokes at present.
Todd, despite Mr. Celeste's vehement denials that he may pull out of the race, that's still a possibility, you know. And despite his denials that there is some pressure being exerted on him, especially by top party leaders here in the county. They would like him out to set Locher against Stokes face to face.
In either case, do you think that Mr. Celeste is constituting enough of a factor here to make the difference between one man's winning and the other?
I personally don't think so. I think that if Council President Stanton had remained in the race, I think Carl Stokes would have been in. He would have won the Democratic nomination for mayor.
Well, we're aware that considerable party pressure and considerable pressure from other directions has been exerted on Frank Celeste to get him out of the race, which indicates, of course, that Mike, you're a little more optimistic than the party leaders, because they still figure that Celeste's entry in the race is a hazardous obstacle which they'd like to remove. I don't know whether Frank Celeste is as stubborn as Ralph Locher, but because they tried to get Ralph Locher to take a federal judgeship, anything to get out of the picture, because he's not a very attractive image and he's hard to sell. He has the advantages of an incumbent in a primary election where the machine goes to work. This is where they do their job. They do the job because they have a lot of captive votes, they have the patronage and so forth, and they can crack the whip. They have a better chance of getting the run-of-the-mill voter out to a primary. Stokes is not against an impossible situation. Those of us who are supporting him and working for him figure that he's going to need the benefit of a massive registration campaign, and we are conducting such a campaign.
Yes, there's quite a bit of effort in that direction.
There's
CORE
very
is
well-
at it, and Martin Luther King and his group have announced that they're going to help with registration. How many do you think, that is, do you think you can get a seriously large change?
Well, we'll be in that trying. At the moment, registrations at the Board of Elections are averaging out about 100 a day. We are contributing our share of sepia registrants to that. We have had, because of the nature of Negro removal in this town, we keep moving people from one place to the other. We've moved them from the central area to Huff, and there's a lot of work to be done. Our immediate analysis is that we're going to have to do a great deal of work on Negroes who still live in Cleveland because they've moved to new addresses, because they keep tearing down buildings and moving them, and so we got a heck of a job of getting them to register at their new addresses. Now, there's been some influx into East Cleveland. They can't vote in Cleveland, so that let us presume that at the moment we'll have around about 300,000 people qualified in Cleveland to vote. Let's take it mathematically. It would be a miracle if we get more than 150,000 of these people out to the polls. And if they are as optimistic about the shoe-in for Ralph Locher as Mike is, then some of them will say naturally, as they always do in the primary, this is a shoe-in, and so we don't have to vote. We don't have to go out and vote. He's going to lick this guy. And these are factors that are imponderables in an election. But Stokes knows this, that he isn't a shoe-in. He's the underdog, and considerable work has to be done. Now, let me say this, too, that there are some people who have great stakes that go far beyond racial lines in this campaign. They're going to evaluate this election as to whether the election of Carl Stokes over Ralph Locher is good for the city of Cleveland. It's good for their investments. It's good for industry. If a new and bright image can be brought, if new hope can be stimulated in this, will it mean millions in progress and building and development and new industries? And these are the hard-nosed people to whom the game is money. And there's going to be some evaluation. Now, although there's a theory that all of them have moved out of the city of Cleveland, all of them haven't. There are some very solid and substantial people who have great stakes in continuing Cleveland first as a progressive city, as a peaceful city, as a forward-moving city. And these are the people who may or may not be affected by the considerations of race. I think that they're going to make an evaluation on what the election of Ralph Locher or the election of Carl Stokes or the election of Frank Celeste is going to mean 10 years from now in Cleveland. And I think some white people are going to vote for Carl Stokes because if they have all their marbles, and a lot of them do, they may think that Cleveland, as the first city in America, the first really big city, with a progressive, alert, intelligent Negro mayor, may set the pace for America and may be the salvation of a lot of things. So he's an underdog, but he'll be in there fighting.
Charlie, let's put it this way. Supposing Stokes does win the Democratic nomination for mayor, do you think he can beat Taft in the general election?
Well, now, he'll beat Taft. He'll beat Taft because if Taft wins the mayoralty of Cleveland, the whole political machine, and the fellows who've been fighting Stokes like mad, for one reason or another, will be fighting for Stokes to save the plums, the political power to control.
To save City Hall for the Democrats,
city, a Democratic county. And they have no recourse than to support Stokes.
Let me ask Mike one more question here. Mike, you've covered city council meetings and you've watched city government. You've covered the mayor's office and City Hall in general. if Stokes were elected mayor of Cleveland, how do you suppose he and city council would be able to get along and manage the affairs of the community? That is often a very sore and difficult point. We've had some mayors who couldn't get along with council. We've had some mayors like Tom Burke who was cute enough to get along with city council even when city council didn't enjoy being got along with. Then we've had times like when Tony Celebrezzi was mayor, when he and council were at swords points, and a good many things got stalled as a result of that. Tell me, how do you think Stokes would manage as the executive working with the city council if the city council were approximately what it is right now?
Well, Todd, first of all, as you well know, we have 10 Negro councilmen, which, if they are reelected, and I think most of them will be, that's a good start for Carl right there. And I think we'll pick up another 2 or 3 Negro councilmen this fall.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll come up with maybe about 13 out of 33. And if the Republicans are a little lucky, maybe pick up a couple more and give them 4. I think they can work out a deal with the Negro councilmen and the Republicans, and they can carry the vote. They can have 17 votes.
So you don't believe that there would be any impasse between the executive and the legislative branches at City Hall were Stokes to be elected?
No, I give him an awful lot of credit. He's a pretty sharp boy, and I think he could work with council very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've beaten this more or less to a pulp without getting into any fist fights, and I hope we've kept it interesting in spite of that. I think now we would like to shift to our other topic, which is the poverty program, the poverty picture, and especially one particular section of the poverty effort, anti-poverty effort here in Cuyahoga County. And therefore I'm now going to introduce to you Stephen Minter. Steve is, I'm acquainted with Steve and with his work, and he is a person who can speak with considerable authority on where we're going in one part of the poverty program. This is Stephen Minter, who's chief of the Bureau of Resources of the Cuyahoga County Welfare Department, and I believe that he's in charge of Title V operations of the poverty program of Greater Cleveland. What in the world is Title V?
Well, Title V refers to Title V of the Economic Opportunity Act, or as some people would say, Sergeant Shriver's office. It's the work experience and training program for adults who are unemployed but heads of household receiving public assistance in Cleveland. That is, they're on public welfare.
All right, now let me just cut in. Of the poor, those who are by definition in poverty in Greater Cleveland, not all of them, of course, are on welfare.
No.
Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So that of that group, you have this group, which is the people who are heads of families and who are on any of the welfare programs, and I suppose that means aid for families with dependent children, and it's...
well, it's primarily the aid for families with dependent children
and
the
people on relief.
The fathers who are in what we call the AFDCUP program.
AFDCU, yes.
Unemployed parents.
Yes. So that you have a group there that is one part of all the people in poverty, and you're dealing with them. Now, is that only males, or is it also mothers?
It's both.
Mothers and fathers,
right.
Heads of family, whether they're male or female, right? How many of them are there?
Well, at the present time, in our own county, we have roughly 10,300 mothers on the program, AFDC mothers,
yes,
on public welfare, and about 800 men who are unemployed.
I see.
Now, we would love to have a program that would be that large. I think that would probably take up all of the nation's appropriation for Title V. We are presently involved in working with about 1,100 men and women. It's almost 50-50 ratio at this point, and providing them the kind of adult education, work experience and training, vocational training, casework counseling, vocational counseling, daycare, medical services, almost anything that needs to be done to try and help them get back into the labor market on a competitive basis.
Right. Well, then you're doing the kind of rehabilitation that is dreamed of and always was dreamed of by welfare people, where you have every kind of facility that might be necessary. One guy comes in and his problem is he isn't even literate, and so you have literacy
Right.
classes. The next person is a woman who once learned how to be a beautician, and even worked at it, but now she has 3 small children, and she'd have to put them somewhere in order to, so you need a daycare center, is that it?
This is exactly the kind of program that we have. That doesn't mean that we necessarily do everything,
Yeah.
but it means that for the first time we have the resources and the staff to do the necessary things. For example,
That's thanks to the OEO. That's
right.
thanks to the
this
poverty,
is thanks very
anti-poverty,
much to the appropriation.
the federal appropriation.
This year we
Yeah.
have $1,890,000 to provide basic assistance to supplement Ohio's welfare grants, and then money to purchase educational vocational training. For example, when OEO suffered a sharp cutback in funds last year, they were unable to refund the Adult Education Center, which we see as something very important in Cleveland.
Is that where they get this literacy and other basic
That's
education?
correct.
Yes.
Out of the Title V grant, we were able to get $170,000 to pay for our portion of the people who attend the Adult Education Center, because it's that important to their futures. This is particularly true of the women, because we are talking about primarily a group of Negro women who are trying to pull themselves up. And in today's labor market, where women are going into the labor market in record numbers, the competition is tremendous. You've got to have a high school education, and plus you've still got the problems of overcoming discrimination and so forth, so that we really have to do a job of preparing them. Adult education is a very central part of this.
How many people have you placed in jobs? And I mean not placed in jobs and fell right out of them the next 2 weeks, but how many have you placed in jobs so that they can be considered playing in our league and working like other people and bringing home that paycheck?
Well, we've been in operation about 25 months, and in 25 months we've placed over 1,100 persons in employment who are now self-sustaining, and we've had, I think, speaks well of the program and of the people who participated in it, very few who've come back. I
What
mean,
kind of jobs did you get for these people?
They're in all kinds of jobs. We've got people who have gone into basic labor. We have people who have become beauticians. We have persons that we've been able to train in conjunction with Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Board of Education as teacher aides. We recently had a class of 23 out of 24 men complete stationary engineering course at West Side Engineering, and 23 of them are employed at salaries in excess of $2.50 an hour. One of the things we've put a lot of emphasis on in Title V is not only just to get them into the regular jobs that are available that they weren't qualified to fill, but also to look at this whole new area of what we call new careers for the poor. That is, we've got to open up new kinds of job possibilities. So we've been very much involved in this, the training of welfare aides, and teacher assistants, and sanitation aides for the city of Cleveland. And we've found that these jobs, some of them don't pay the world's greatest salaries, but the salaries are only a part of what many of the poor are concerned about. They also want jobs that offer some kind of status and some recognition that they're useful citizens. So this has been one of the kinds of things that we've been pushing.
You're saying a thing that's very important here for an awful lot of people, because I've talked with a great many, I would think, reasonably intelligent people, although I'm sure they're not too well informed. They think that once a person gets on a welfare check, he doesn't ever want to get off that thing anymore. And this is presuming, I guess, that those people aren't built the same way we are, and that they don't get any satisfaction out of a job or out of the feeling that they're really functioning in the society. What is your feeling as a result of working with, now let's see, you've placed 1,100 and you're working with 1,100. That's
Right.
2,200 persons in all, either fairly well on the first rung or else on their way to that in order to become self-sustaining. Do they like it? Are they reluctant? Do they drag their heels or what?
Well, I think that it's hard sometimes to make sweeping generalizations. But let me say that
Even when
one of
you're
the most-
invited to, like I just
Right.
did.
So let me break it down. It's not a simple kind of thing when you're unemployed and you're receiving a public assistance grant and perhaps you have a large family. A lot depends on what kind of skills and what kind of job you're going to be able to get and are you going to be able to manage. I think one of the things that we've seen very clearly is that an awful lot of these people have strong desires to get out and become self-supporting. What sometimes they run into is that the kind of job that they can get is only going to pay $1.55 an hour, and it won't even come close to paying half of their welfare grant that we've already acknowledged in Ohio is terribly insufficient. However, I think the crucial thing that we've seen time after time after time, that if we've said to some of these people who've been unable to get the kind of job where they can say, I'm free, that if they've been able to say, look, if I start here, I can see I'm going to be able to get a raise in 6 months, and I'm going to be able to make progress, they've moved off the welfare roll.
They'll move off the rolls even though it's at an immediate loss.
I can recall quite vividly one of the first cases that we ran into where a person, young mother with a couple of children, was getting $220 a month on public welfare. She had successfully completed a MDTA training program. but
What's
was unable.
MDTA?
Oh, Manpower Development Training
Okay.
Act, sponsored by the Department of Labor. She successfully completed the typing program, but then didn't have enough work experience to get the job. So she was assigned to an assignment at City Hall and started to work. And they said, she's tremendous. Let's hire her. And they offered her employment at $250 a month. But by the time she got through taking out her car fare, her retirement, her medical insurance, her transportation, she was going to be coming home with roughly $190 a month. Now, that was a tough decision. And yet, she, like many others, made the decision, I've got to get off, and yes, I can get a little bit of additional help from the agency, but, maybe if the city income tax passes, and maybe if this happens, I'm going to get a raise. And there are a lot of people who've made this decision.
Now, let me ask you
Sorry.
if there isn't way at the other end, however, among the harder to rescue types, some of those who, because of frustrations, because of discouraging backgrounds, even maybe parents who say, don't go for that malarkey they're giving you down there. Even though you offer them a job, we'll say, yeah, what kind of job? Some kind of a menial sweep-up kind of a job, and we'll walk out on you and refuse to accept this kind of help.
I think, first of all, you've got to realize that when a person gets on welfare and ends up in our program, that where do they go down from there? To a certain point, they've reached the lowest point, and we've got to do a job in terms of rehabilitating and helping them move back up. Secondly, the whole war on poverty has put an emphasis on people being more demanding and verbalizing what they want to do. And this has kind of been our mandate, and we've got everybody looking over our shoulders. We don't want to fail. That's not to say we don't have people who are not satisfied with their kinds of assignments. But by and large, this is something that we try and work out. We don't make assignments for a specific length of time and say, you're going to be on this project for a year. You're assigned to a project until the person's either demonstrated that they're capable of moving on to something else, or the kind of opportunity that we're really looking for in conjunction with the person is available. That's not to say that we don't have failures, because while we've had 1,100 successes, we've had 400 or 500 failures too, where we just have been unable to work out a satisfactory kind of plan, or perhaps the marital problems were so great the family unit dissolved, or this kind of thing. But by and large, I'd say our people are fairly highly motivated and make demands on us when they don't like their assignments.
Well, there's increasing opposition in Congress to the expenditure of funds for the kind of work that you're doing and all of the poverty programs. Do you think that after 25 months of experience in your particular program, that you can make a powerful argument for its continuance, and instead of a reduction of funds, possibly an increase of funds for it? I understand you were in Washington making such an argument. What did you tell these congressmen?
Right, I just came back from trying to tell the congressman some of the very things I've mentioned here. I was testifying before the House Education and Labor Committee about Title V, what we've been able to do, and I'd say by and large the reaction of the congressmen there were very favorable. There's not a great argument about that Title V wasn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. Instead, there seems to be more of a battle about which one of the two large federal agencies is going to run the program, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, or the Department of Labor. Needless to say, I'm hopeful that the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare wins out for a number of reasons.
If you did end up with this thing dismembered or parceled out to various agencies of federal government, I understand this would result in your having to answer to two different agencies, both the Labor Department and the Health, Education, and Welfare Department, while you're trying to do this generalized rehabilitative work where you've got to use every facility. And wouldn't that increase the red tape immensely? That usually multiplies red tape 4, 6, or 16 times. Whom would you have to answer to if they made this change in your program?
It would increase it immensely. We already have, enough red tape in a bureaucratic structure. At the present time, we're part of the Office of Special Services of the Bureau of Family Services in Washington and have to come through a regional office in Chicago, the State Welfare Department in Columbus. Now, in the new setup, the Department of Labor also comes into this, and we have to go through their national and regional structure in not just one bureau, but in 3 bureaus: the Bureau of Work Programs, the Bureau of Apprenticeship and Training, and the Bureau of Employment Security. And those of us who work down at the grassroots level know that, this means just an increased amount of paperwork and guidelines. And I think this is the thing to really be concerned about, is that the tighter you write the guidelines and the more rules and regulations you write at the national level, by the time they get down to the local community, that means less flexibility, less self-initiative, and this kind of thing. And I think this is the genius of many of the poverty programs.
Well, the Labor Department, Steve, already has its foot in the door so far as the city of Cleveland is concerned with this $5 million or better AIM Jobs program. How does it differ basically from your program, and how do you relate to that program?
Well, I don't think in many respects it differs very much from Title V. In fact, I'd like to think that the community and the nation has benefited from our demonstration and come up with a comprehensive kind of program. As far as for our relationship with AIM Jobs, the Title V's mandate when we started the program was to work on individual employability plans for each person and to use every resource in the community. So we have Title V people who are in on-the-job training programs for AIM Jobs. Let me give one specific kind of example. Under AIM Jobs, there's money available, what we call Scheuer programs, to train people in new careers. And the Welfare Department subcontracted, along with the community college, to train 60 welfare aides and 60 home health aides, or like homemakers, and guarantee these persons employment during the coming year. Now, the financing for this is coming out of AIM Jobs, and we referred people there. They're being trained there. They're coming back to us, and we're hiring them as employees. Some of these people are Title V trainees. If a new program comes into town tomorrow and it offers some kind of training that we've got people that can take it, we slot them into those programs.
Steve, is the county here in the state of Ohio taking full advantage of participating in all the federal anti-poverty programs?
To my knowledge, it is. course, I'm not responsible for the administration of the community action programs, but I think it's generally agreed that Cleveland, under the leadership of its Council of Economic Opportunities, is participating in just about every program that comes along and trying to get as much mileage as it possibly can.
How about the state of Ohio?
I don't know enough about the Ohio scene. It's difficult enough keeping up with what goes on here.
Let me get back to some of these resources in which, where you're in charge. The Day Nursery Association was hoping to be able to dot all through various neighborhoods where there were a great many women who could go into useful employment if they had a place to put their youngsters. They were hoping to dot all through those neighborhoods in homes, daycare centers where they would train people who are already in poverty, mothers, for example, or elderly women, who would be able to take care of youngsters. They hoped in this way they would free scores of younger women who were eligible for employment outside the home. Well, they found, I understand, that most homes don't pass muster. They aren't safe enough for youngsters. The people are all right, but the homes are rickety. They don't have play space. They don't have the facilities that they need. It's not an easy job to find daycare centers in neighborhoods where there are a lot of tumble-down homes. Have you started recruiting your own daycare centers, or how do you work that?
Well, we started out trying to look at the possibility of developing group homes, but our experience is very much the same as the Day Nursery had. Our coordinator, Mrs. Ione Willis, hit on a solution which we think really is quite significant, and that is that she, in looking around, most of the children who need daycare of working mothers are school-age children. So therefore, you've got to locate a facility near the school. Secondly, it's got to be something that can be approved. And we finally decided, or I should say she decided, that the best buildings available were the churches. And so we've started in September of last year a program with a group of churches in the areas where we need daycare the most to provide facilities and proper supervision and nutrition and so forth from 7:30 to 5:30 for children of working parents or parents right now who are involved in the Title V program. And this has been a very exciting program. We've had visitors from all over the nation to see it. We presently have 9 Title V daycare centers in operation and have been asked by the new Concentrated Cities Program, Project AIM, to provide 5 more centers for preschool and school-age children. We think this is maybe one of the best stopgap kinds of measures. And also, it makes the care a little less expensive because the churches, they're functioning on a non-sectarian basis, but the churches are putting in an investment of their own. They're putting up their building, some of their custodial time, and we've been very impressed at the kind of job they've done in terms of making a contribution to the community.
In this way, you have liberated a lot of these women who otherwise would never be able to go out and work.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you one general question, Steve. This rescue operation of yours starts from the top, of course, from the most eligible people who were practically participants in our society were probably the first to take advantage of these programs and to work their way off welfare. Little by little, you get more and more of them, and as you get deeper, you get into tougher and tougher problems, personality problems, and the
Todd,
like.
I'm not sure that's really true.
No?
One of the things we did when we started in the beginning of the program was to put emphasis on men. So at the first month, we had 1,365 men out of about 1,500 at that time who were on public assistance on the ADCU rolls. I don't think we could say we're gradually working our way down to the hardcore. I think what we've found from experience is that they all have, each person has a different set of problems that they're confronted with. It takes a different amount of education and so forth, and it's going to take some longer. So that, for me anyway, it's difficult to define exactly who's the hardcore, and now we're really getting down to the hardcore. I'm not so sure that some of the people we're working with now are any more hardcore than the ones we started out with 2 years ago. It's just that some of the kinds of problems that an individual presents or the amount of training he needs is going to vary greatly. I think this is something that I feel quite strongly about.
Are you hopeful that eventually you work them all off relief and welfare?
Well, that would be our hope, of course.
You think it's possible?
No, I don't think it's possible. I do think, however, that it is possible to substantially reduce the number of persons who are presently tax dependents, given the proper kinds of training, the proper kinds of support from the community.
Of these families that you have on the list, these 10,300 mothers that you mentioned earlier in the program, how many are white and how many are Negro mothers?
You know, roughly it's about, public assistance rolls about 80% Negro.
Now, is there a difference in the problems affecting this 20% and 80%, the attitude toward the program, the ability to recruit them for training and help? What's the reaction? Is it varying according to race, or is the common denominator poverty and trouble?
Well, that's one question that I think I can answer with some authority, having been a caseworker and a supervisor and having worked in both the east side and the near west side. I've never seen, and I think people in our agency would agree, there substantially is no difference between the attitudes or the kinds of problems that Negroes versus whites face. The common denominator is lack of income, and then a whole range of different kinds of problems that they have to overcome. But we've never really seen that there's a difference. White people have certain kinds of problems that Negro people don't have. They're pretty much the same kind of thing.
Let me ask about money. A lot of people, including some much respected economists, are advocating a guaranteed annual income or negative income tax in order to put money in the hands of the poor. The theory being people are poor, and you cure their poverty by giving them money. Once you give them money, they're no longer in poverty. If you did that, if we as taxpayers did that, would that mean we would no longer need any of these supportive casework, individual vocational training, and all these other services, which have apparently made a big difference in getting these people into gainful employment and back into the league that we all play in earning society?
It's not an either-or proposition. I think we would agree, having worked with the poor for such a long period of time, that the first only common characteristic that all of them have is that they don't have enough money. And I think it's been well documented in our state that the need to provide substantially more so that they can live. But that's not the whole answer. I think, if we suddenly raised welfare grants to 120%, we'd still have some of the same kinds of problems. It's not, the two have got to go together. The public has got to be willing to say we're going to provide an adequate amount for them to live on, and also an adequate amount of services so they will not have to continue to be dependent. And it doesn't go the other way either. I mean, there are people who advocate give them services and give them the same amount of money, and that's going to help. You've got to do both things. I think this is the one thing we've seen, is that you can't talk about education and not talk about medical care and daycare. And you can't talk about work training and forget about supportive services. And you can't talk about money. You've got to take a step forward in all directions at the same time if you're going to really make progress.
Are we up to 100%? What have they done in Columbus so far in order to get us up from where we were in the 70s?
Well, the legislature just finished deliberating on this, and the decision was made to raise grants for ADC families from roughly 78% to 83%. That's progress. We would have liked to have seen a great deal more. The Welfare Department, and I think the Welfare Federation of Cleveland, and pretty much the citizens of Greater Cleveland were pretty loud in verbalizing their support for a 100% grant. We weren't successful. I hope that we haven't seen the end of consideration.
Isn't there a string attached to some of this rise in the percentage? Isn't the county going to have to pick up some of that tab? How much of it?
Right. Well, it was first proposed that it would be on a 50-50 matching basis, any of the increase over 78%. Now they've given some of it, but next year there's a string attached in that I believe the county would have to come up with 2/3 of the amount of money, and the state only 1/3 of the difference between 78% and 100%. And of course, this has rather substantial impact for the large metropolitan areas, because it would mean, I think, for a county like ours, over $4 million that we're talking about. And this means a need to go back to the taxpayers of this county and say, you approve this extra, when already there's been very careful consideration in the state of Ohio in terms of financing of public welfare, and a decision was just made in 1965 to do it on a 90-10 federal state to local formula.
Well, Steve, would you say the state is shirking its responsibility in that field?
I think so. I would feel that the kind of plan that has been set up is one that's sound. We've just gone through restructuring the entire agency and the financing plan for the county. Unless some other kinds of tax funds are going to be made available to the county, I feel strongly it's the state's responsibility.
Of course, that's right now being debated down in Columbus. There is the possibility that counties are going to be given the authority to ask taxes and impose taxes that are on something other than real estate, which is allegedly at the end of its string. They're talking about county income taxes, and they're talking about additional auto license taxes, and they're talking about excise taxes on utility bills and the like. And if we were able to tap that sort of resource, there would be this advantage, that we wouldn't have to wait and have that money go down to Columbus and then only part of it come back. It could be imposed right here, and it could be used right here for just these purposes that you speak of. Could your program stand, and would it be more effective if it had more money from the county or any such source? Could you take on more than 1,100 welfare clients usefully and work them out of poverty and out of welfare faster if you had more money?
I think there's no question about it. We presently have about 400 women who are in training, and I think a rather conservative estimate would be that we could train 2,000 if the community, and if there was enough money available to provide the kinds of training, employment opportunities, the kinds of daycare facilities just for mothers alone. It's going to cost substantially more to be able to provide this, and we've got to find the funds someplace.
Well, Steve, it seems to me that one conclusion we can all reach here is that for a long time, the advantage in any community and in this nation is going to have to pay the freight to bring some people up to productive capacity. It's cost a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. What will it cost us if we quit doing it?
Well, I would have to refer, I think, to the kinds of problems that we're having in all of the major urban cities throughout the country now. I think this is very much a symptom of our failure to really heed the requests of the people who are in poverty. And I don't think it's restricted to one race. As a matter of fact, I just came from a meeting a couple days ago where the people on the near west side of Cleveland were saying how disappointed they are that everything seems to be sent to the east side, that maybe they're going to have to manufacture something on their side of town to call the attention, the plight, the situation there. We're going to have to spend money. There's just no way around it. And I think the public has the responsibility to make sure that we're good stewards of the funds that they invest. But the approach has been to exercise stewardship by continually cutting back the amount of money rather than saying, here's enough money to do the kind of job, now produce.
Well, thanks very much, Steve. You've been very informative. I think you've solved the problem. The only problem that now remains is for us to go down and sell Congress and the state on the money problem. Thanks again, Mr. Minter. That's been very helpful, and I think we've rounded up the poverty program. So I think at this point, I just want to review one thing. We were reminded here that we didn't talk enough about the qualifications of the people who are running for the mayoralty. If anybody wants to speak up and give a biography of any of the candidates, whether it's Seth Taft or Carl Stokes or Ralph Locher or Mr. Celeste, let's review that just this far at least. Let's remind the people here that we have here some pretty respectable gentlemen who are running for a very important office, and maybe one of the most difficult, perhaps even an impossible job, as most mayors are finding. What are the qualifications of your candidates, gentlemen?
Well, I'd like to feel that Carl Stokes, since you're going to give him to me, and I'll accept him with pleasure and with a certain measure of pride, is an excellent candidate any way you look at a candidate. He has had experience in government. His record in the legislature indicates that he is sensitive to problems such as those that we have discussed, that he has imagination. A candidate must have attraction. He's a good-looking fellow, almost as pretty as Steve here. And so he registers well.
Pretty?
He is accepted in every area of public life here. In the last campaign, he certainly demonstrated a knowledge of the problems.
Mike,
Tom,
what were you going to say?
I'm going to use my question this way. Since both daily newspapers have been so critical of Mayor Locher, can you foresee the possibility of either the Flangular or the press endorsing Carl Stokes for mayor?
I really don't know that, Mike. I don't know what's on the minds of editors. I'm associated, but I'm not associated that closely with them. I think that they prefer to keep the thing entirely open and to watch the campaign. I do, however, personally believe that Mr. Celeste has not even come to enough notice, actually, in his campaigning so far to justify anybody who's deciding, now, here's a fellow who really grabs the ball and goes with it. He sounds like a committee instead of like a candidate. Most political candidates are egos with force and drive, and they run their campaigns. This has kind of, again, put it back to a discussion of whether Mr. Locher, who is a very good defense attorney, or Mr. Stokes, who is a very brilliant legislative performer, is the man that ought to be endorsed. I rather think that that's the way the picture looks to the two editors right now.
Well, Todd, do you think the papers will eat crow and endorse Locher again after all that criticism?
I think that's possible, but I, of course, have no indication. What about WKYC?
We have no editorial position, sir.
Well, I would put in this 2 cents worth. I have a feeling that on the very merits of the case, and our newspapers do have some integrity when they want to use it, but it's not unlikely that one or the other of the major daily newspapers will endorse those. If they look at the logic of the situation, and some of the editors have already editorially expressed the need for new verve, new interest, a new outlook in Cleveland, it isn't impossible, and I think it's highly probable that one of the other newspapers will endorse those.
Well, that will be a very interesting thing, and this is certainly going to be a very interesting mayoralty campaign, and certainly crucial for a city of this size in the present national atmosphere. Now I think that winds it up, gentlemen, and I want to thank you, Charlie Loeb.
Yes,
I want to thank you, Mike Trehosick. I want to thank you, Mr. Minter, out there. And I want to thank myself for having sat through all this verbiage. And I hope we'll see you again in a month when Outlook starts again to review the news of its past month and to look forward to what may be happening shortly after. And I also look forward to our moderator, Professor Will Irwin returning and taking on this job that I've tried to carry for 2 months. Thanks very kindly.
This has been Outlook, a review of the month in Greater Cleveland. This program has been devised to complement our monthly News in Perspective, featuring analysis of national and international news developments. This program was produced in the studios of WVIZ, Cleveland.